Welcome along to the Football Daily. I'm Emma Saunders, and we've got a big weekend of football to get through. With me, as always, is Ben Haynes from 90 Min, Leyton Orient captain Joby McAnuff, and Luke Edwards, Daily Telegraph journalist and Leyton Orient fan. So Joby, with that, first things first, I know you'll be glad you won yesterday, 3 points of course, but I'm sure when that full-time whistle blew, you were thinking, phew, Luke's hopefully going to be a bit easier on me this time round.
Yeah, I had a bit of a rough ride the last time I was on, I've got to be honest. So unfortunately now, instead of thinking how great a result it is for the club, my main priority is that Luke's happy at the end of the weekend. So I'm glad tonight he's not going to give me too much stick.
I was so happy, and it's been it's 3 wins in a week, 9 points. I just wanted to ask you though, at the end of the game, there's like a last-minute winner, Joby, and all the young players are all really exuberant, like really piling on each other and having a great time. And then there's just this guy jogs into screen right at the end, and it just seemed to be you. I just wondered what was going through your mind at that point.
Well, first of all, you suggested I was moving very slowly.
yes, that's exactly what I said.
Here we go again. Here we go again.
It just takes me a little while to get up. So, having to run back to the halfway line, I thought I'd conserve my energy for the final 5 minutes and make sure we get over the line.
Well, I'm glad it's all peace, joy and harmony between you two. Ben, very much the same, especially with the joy element. Spurs, top of the table once more as we record the pod.
Yeah, getting weird this. Altitude sickness.
Well, listen, there's been some big results this weekend, so let's get straight to it. And actually, with that, it is actually quite difficult to know where to start. But we will go to the Emirates first, where it finished Arsenal 1, Wolves 2 on Sunday evening. Arsenal now 14th in the Premier League table after their 5th league defeat. Building up to kickoff, I think certainly on air on 5 Live, the team there were so excited about what a fun game this could be, the goals that we expected, which came. But the narrative in this game, it did take a pretty nasty twist early on when David Luiz and Raul Jimenez clashed heads. Jimenez was taken to hospital, but David Luiz did carry on with his head in a bandage, that before being withdrawn at half-time. Lots of debate on whether he should have carried on or not, David Luiz. Arsenal say that they followed the protocols. Luke, thoughts?
Yeah, this is where concussion substitutes should come in, and I know they're trialling it now. I don't see why they're trialling it. We've already got concussion substitutes in lots of other sports, lots of other contact sports. The Daily Telegraph, obviously who I work for, have been running a campaign on this since 2017, linked to dementia in football, but also with this idea of players, whether they feel honour bound to carry on with a head injury, I don't know, but it's dangerous. We're talking about people's long-term health and their short-term health now. David Luiz, I saw him. He was aware of his surroundings, but he was clearly dazed. And that's me just looking at him from the visual signs on the television. Either the club's medical staff have got to be stronger and force the players off, or the Premier League are going to have to be, or the authorities are going to have to be stronger and say any head injury, like they do in rugby, you go off the pitch, a substitute comes on, so you're not a man down. I think a lot of players think that, I've got to carry on because the substitute's not ready, or blah, 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 blah. No. Medical staff are not going to be strong and take the players off. The Premier League and the authorities have to intervene and say any head injury, they're taken off to the dressing room to be given a head injury assessment, and a concussion substitute comes on. I can't understand why we're still talking about this. It should have happened a long, long time ago. And really, I think that's exactly right. We've got one player in hospital with a serious head injury. The force of those heads colliding were the same for David Luiz as the guy who's in hospital, who left the pitch on a stretcher. But David Luiz continues till half-time. He's obviously not feeling well at half-time. He's obviously not complete, all his faculties aren't there. He should have gone off straight away and had a head assessment in the dressing room, and that's why we need the concussion substitutes.
Absolutely agree. I mean, as a player, you get a knock, and the last thing you want to do is come off the football pitch, unless you absolutely have to. So there is times where you've had a bang and you get up and you are a little bit groggy. But again, until there's a rule that says you have to leave the pitch, whether that is, again, the clubs or the Premier League or the Football League, whoever it is, governing that game, it will carry on. The protocols are getting better in terms of after a concussion has happened. So maybe after a game, having the protocol that you use. But in terms of when it actually happens, they're still not good enough. And I think having that substitute rule would really help, because it just gives that player, 5-10 minutes to see where he is. There are times where you are fine to carry on, but sometimes it takes that few minutes to really assess clearly again, where you're not rushing thinking, oh, I've got to get back on the pitch because my team's a man down. There's a lot of pressure around that situation. So, I agree with Luke. I think more can be done. And I don't see why that would be an issue, moving forward, because, God forbid something really terrible happens, and it might not be that actual incident. It might be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour later on, that because that first instance wasn't dealt with properly, we could have an issue later on.
Have you ever played on where you felt like you're not really? I mean, I've been, he received a whack on the head, and it's often it is like 10, 15 minutes later that you start feeling woozy. Have you played on in your career, Joby, when that's happened?
Yeah, definitely, and I think that'd probably be the same for most professional players, certainly that have played, a certain amount of time. It's a combination of things, again, it's just a whack. In football terms, it might be, I'm a little bit, dazed, but you'll get through it. And sometimes you do get through it, but then sometimes, we had a lad recently, a young boy who got a whack on the head and carried on, but felt like he was okay, literally got in at half time. So he probably played similar to David Luiz, probably 10, 15 minutes, got into half time, and he literally was just sitting there, felt sick, headache, blurred vision, the lot really. And that was fairly innocuous. That wasn't a massive clash like this was, but it goes to show it doesn't need a lot to potentially cause, a great deal of pain and possibly issues.
There needs to be no way of the idea of like nobility or the idea of you somehow letting your team down, playing into it in any way. There has to be a way of interjecting in between that so that examinations aren't done on a case of, oh, could you play on? It's just quite simply like, no, you can't. Take the decision away from any interference from the clubs whatsoever. And I'm not suggesting for a second that there aren't protocols that are not being observed, because I'm sure that Arsenal's medical team had David Luiz's safety at the number one priority in their mind. I think Kelly Kate sort of summed it up perfectly on Twitter. She said there's a trend to view players as expendable. There's a school of thought that because they're paid huge salaries, they should put their health on the line. And she doesn't think that anyone should have to do that. I think that's so spot on. There's this idea that if you somehow walk off or leave the pitch because you fear for your health, that you're somehow weak, whereas in actual fact you're just smart, and we need to change the perception and change the lens that we view these injuries through.
That incident occurred early on in the game. It was still goalless, but Wolves did go on to win 2-1, which does mean, Joby, that Arsenal are 14th after their 5th league defeat. I just don't feel this is getting the attention perhaps it should. Is this just a sign, though, of where Arsenal are at?
In a word, yeah. I think when Mikel Arteta went in, there was a lot of fanfare. Of course, he got off to a good start. For me, probably people getting a little bit carried away, because as good as he may or may not be, they've still got a similar group of players that, for me, are not at the level that we're used to seeing Arsenal. And I think he was really keen to go in and try and really just get a defensive structure, maybe get them more organised, a little bit more solid than they were before. We always knew that they were good going forward, but, a bit soft, and would let goals in at bad times, which obviously was affecting results. I think he's possibly gone a little bit too far. The goal record hasn't been good recently, and I think they're suffering a little bit for maybe being too organised. I know it sounds crazy, but you see the likes of, again, we talk about strike forces, Lacazette, not scoring any goals at the moment. Aubameyang's really dried up recently. Pepe just hasn't worked. Let's be honest about that. So something's not quite working when those caliber players are not finding the net.
I think you have to be careful in the job I do, and as you all know, I'm quite strongly opinionated in what I say, and you can end up with egg on your face, and I'm sure if we do a highlights compilation of this podcast at the end of the season, I'll have said some most stupid things going. But the fanfare of sort of the Arteta revolution, I always felt it was a bit premature. And I remember there was the game against Liverpool where they were passing out from the back, and this was supposed to be the moment that Arsenal had made it. They were just playing into Liverpool's hands, and I was looking at it going, I think this is naive. I think Liverpool are absolutely delighted they're trying to do this, and they were Liverpool doing the high press, and they could have scored a lot more than they did, and everyone held this up as this great Arsenal performance. Arsenal are in the bottom half of the table, and for me, there's serious pressure now on Arteta because he's been there a while, and I know these things take time. No way am I suggesting that Arteta should lose his job or that it needs a change in management, but there's serious pressure on him now because we're not seeing it. We're not seeing the improvements. I've heard a lot about philosophies and ideas about the games and, you know, what's his identity of the Arsenal team? Well, the identity of Arsenal for the last few years has been bang average. And actually, that's the identity that seems to be carrying on with Mikel Arteta. There's been a lot of chat about philosophy. He looks good. He talks well. He's presentable. He came from Pep Guardiola. He's Pep Guardiola's assistant. I'm not seeing he's having the impact that I expected him to. And quite frankly, that a lot of pundits talked about him having way too early in the season.
That's really interesting you say about the philosophy piece, Luke. We did a thing with Cesc Fabregas a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that at the moment, it's in current guise, so many managers and coaches are stuck between this idea of results and philosophy, and they end up taking some weird hybrid approach where they try and bridge the gap between both, where they can't actually get one or the other. And I think Arteta is straddling that at the moment really poorly, probably partly not helped by the recruitment over the last few years, and probably not helped by the fact that his squad isn't actually all that good. He hasn't got a particularly stunning squad. He's got a squad certainly better than 14th in the Prem, but I don't think he can play the way in which he wants to. I think anytime Arsenal play with 4 at the back, they look incredibly weak in defence. Anytime they play with a 3 at the back with wing backs, they look like they lose out loads going forward. So I think probably long term, he's not the wrong man for Arsenal. I just think he's in a really tough position at the moment. And while they're not scoring goals, the pressure is just going to mount on him and make it even harder to try and turn things around and implement whatever philosophy he wants to bring in.
Well, let's hear now from the Arsenal manager. Here's Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, I am frustrated and I am sad. A lot happened in the game, starting with the collision between David and Raul. Just send my best wishes for him and the club and obviously his family, because it looks pretty serious, and hopefully everything is going to be good. David was okay, it was just a nasty cut, and he was feeling okay but wasn't comfortable carrying on playing.
And in terms of what the doctors did with him on the side of the pitch, you're confident that the right protocols were followed?
All the protocols were followed. The doc tested David a few times. He was completely fine. He didn't lose consciousness or anything like it. It was just a cut. It looked really bad, but for him it was just a cut.
Well, Nuno, I suppose the most important thing, as great a win as that was, is that the news about Raul Jimenez is encouraging. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Thank God, yes.
How unsettling was that for you and the players?
It was badly affected for both teams, for everyone that were in the stadium. Not too many as we reached, but even you, for sure. That situation had a big impact, because you see how serious it is by the reactions of the doctors of both teams that immediately run to help the teammates and the players from Arsenal. Was a very sad moment.
Well, another standout game of the weekend came from the South Coast. Southampton 2, Manchester United 3. Edison Cavani to the rescue for Manchester United, who went in at the break 2 goals down, but by the full-time whistle, they had pulled it back to 3-2, thanks to the introduction of the Uruguayan striker with 2 goals and then an assist to Bruno Fernandes. Let's be clear, it wasn't like United were playing badly before Cavani was brought on, but why do you think, Joby, he made such a difference in this game?
Well, I think he gives Man United a real focal point. You know, I think anyone who knows about Cavani, you know, he brings that physicality that perhaps, you know, they're lacking in that area. You know, they've got some real good technical players up there, but sometimes you just need a bit of, you know, old school, bit of thrust, you know, a bit of direction up there. And I certainly feel, you know, he made that impact today, of course, with the goals, but he does bring that physical element with him. And I think it's just taken him a little while to get up to speed, of course, you know, off the back of, you know, not having signed for anybody earlier on in the season. I think he'll prove to be a real good signing for them and make a good impact.
Luke, I see you nodding away there, especially when Joby said old school, bit of thrust.
Yeah, I mean, he's a spring chicken compared to Joby. I think he doesn't turn 34 until later this next year, February, I think. I did check that before I came on. But no, totally agree with Joby. You need old heads in the dressing room. You need that experience, and particularly the third goal because the cross from Rashford wasn't brilliant, but he made it brilliant by anticipating the flight of the ball and just nipping across. It's just proper old school anticipation for a striker, which is so vital. And you just need, as Joby's just said, it's a focal point for the attack. He gave them something that they didn't have. He's a different sort of striker, which I think Ole said after the game. And for me, that victory, I'm not exaggerating. I think that's as important a victory as Ole's had as Manchester United manager, because at 2-0 down, I'm thinking about doing this pod, and me and Ben are going to be piling in on Ole again, saying it's purgatory with him there. They're never going to do anything, and all the stuff that we've said before. But to come down, it's always the same for any team. And again, Joby will know this. You're 2-0 down. You may be thinking to yourself, we're going to get pelters here. We're going to get absolutely battered. There's going to be questions about the manager's job. To come back and make a match-changing substitution, bringing Cavani on, and to come back, and the way they did it against a really good Southampton team as well, who've been absolutely flying. For me, that's as big a result as Solskjaer's have. I think it vindicates him as manager. I think it shows the team spirit, the determination, all the qualities you need to be a successful team. Huge win for them, and Cavani did turn it with his introduction coming on.
It's mad to think, isn't it, that he was a free agent 54 days ago. And this huge impact that he's had on this game today. I suppose the question is there. He had this impact. He came off the bench. Joby, does he start the next United game, or do you think this is a trick? You have to have him as an impact player.
No, I think he most definitely has done enough to warrant a starting place. I feel that the fact that he hasn't yet is purely down to fitness. As you say, he had a period of time where he was a free agent, and when you're not in somewhere every day training and getting up to speed, it can take a little while. But, again, as Luke pointed out, when you are getting older, I love to see players of his age and, for everything he's achieved, he's played at the highest level, to still want to come to the Premier League, still want to make an impact. I think it's, brilliant to see. And I think he still showed today he's got that desire to want to get into areas to score goals. And again, that is perhaps maybe something that some of the forwards at United have been lacking and have been questioned, their desire to really get into areas and to have a big impact on the game regularly. And, for me, if I was Ole this evening, I'm rubbing my hands thinking, I've got someone to come straight in and start the next game.
There might be an element there as well of having that option. I'm a little bit torn on this. I think Cavani might be better for United off the bench. I think he might be better suited to letting the likes of Greenwood, Rashford, etc., burn out a defence and then open up a few spaces